What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, we're continuing on our list of hidden gems players with the cornerback position, and we can call them sleeper picks, whatever you want to call them. They are players that you're going to be able to pick up for probably not a whole lot within franchise mode and turn them into really good players. And we're getting right into it first with a free agent player. With the latest roster update, there's not a whole lot out here in free agency, so I wanted to get that out of the way first. And that we're going to do with Kalen Barnes, the Baylor product, 6 foot, 183 pounds, 23 years old, so he's one of the younger guys out here in free agency. With that 64 overall, he has 97 speed, half decent agility and change of direction, 93 acceleration, so really good athleticism to go with that 6 foot frame, and a player that is a fantastic addition to any roster that is free right now if you're starting a franchise mode, because he is out there in free agency, totally available for anybody. Just make sure you get to him first. And like with every year, I'm trying to avoid putting too many rookie players on this list, because there's always going to be pretty solid rookies that you could go out and try to grab for your team, but there are going to be a couple here, and one of those players is Damari Mathis out of Pittsburgh, drafted to the Denver Broncos, 5'11", 198 pounds, 93 speed, 23 years old, and a 68 overall. Now, this guy's probably not going to end up on a practice squad. I don't know exactly what will happen with this team in franchise mode, but they have 5 players ahead of them, which is the max amount of players you can have on the cornerback depth chart that are a higher overall, and significantly more serviceable at that. So what this team may decide to do, they may decide to put this guy on the practice squad. He may hold a roster spot. I don't know. He may look to be traded. Who knows what the options hold for the Broncos here. He is certainly a very nice buildable prospect for the future. It just depends on what the team does in franchise mode for you guys. I could see a CPU team certainly putting this guy on the practice squad or something like that. Next up, our entry is going to be from the Cardinals, and that is going to be Marco Wilson. And Marco Wilson is kind of like our last entry, going to be somewhat difficult to acquire because he is actually slotted right now on the roster as the 3rd overall corner. So he's probably going to be utilized in this system, but he's not a rookie, so in most leagues you could trade for this guy. He is 68 overall, much like our last entry, 23 years old, and 92 speed. Really solid athleticism there, and what I'm seeing a lot of this year is players like right above here, Trayvon Mullen, for example, with 90 speed, but lower agility and change of direction, so anything in that 87, 88, and above range is actually going to be pretty solid agility and change of direction, because Madden isn't giving players those ratings as often as they used to. So a guy like Marco Wilson could be very valuable for you if you could find a way to grab. Our next entry on the list is Isaiah Rodgers of the Colts, a 72 overall player, so now getting into the 70s, 24 years old. He has 2 years of experience. He has 94 speed, 90 agility, 93 acceleration, and 89 change of direction. So he meets the mark on everything you could want athletically from a corner. He is 5'10", so he's not on the taller side of things, but I think that his athleticism certainly is going to make up for that, and 24 years old, 72 overall is a pretty nice combination to be able to build a solid corner out of this guy. And then we go on to the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're going to look at Josiah Scott. I believe he's been on this list before. He now has 2 years of experience. He's a 69 overall, 23 years old, 92 speed, 91 agility, 93 acceleration, and 91 change of direction. One of the best athletes on this list. He is very undersized at 5'9", 185, which can be tough to work with, unfortunately, not having the size that you might want to see at the cornerback position, but I think that he is very much available to you because this team can get away with moving on from him. They have Avonte Maddox, who is just as good, if not better, of an athlete ahead of him. They have James Bradbury. They have Darius Slay, and yeah, those guys are veterans, but they could get away with moving on down from Josiah Scott. In addition, having other young guys here on the roster below them that could fill in that void until they draft somebody better. Our next entry onto this list is going to be the 49ers cornerback room. And this is actually my franchise this year that I'm doing with my 32-man league. As the 49ers, I think that they have a pretty loaded cornerback room here, at least athletically speaking. Everybody here you can see has above 90 speed, actually 91 plus, other than the injured Jason Verrett. And to be honest with you, in this cornerback room, I wouldn't really be looking to start any of these lower end guys. I want to develop them for the future, and I can speak to this from a user that's actually using this team this year. So Ambry Thomas is a really good candidate to build up for the future, and then you have guys like Emmanuel Mosley and Trevarius Ward who are very solid contenders right now, and they do a good job covering on the outside. When Verrett comes back from the injury, he's going to be solid. So you end up with guys like Lenoir here, who is potentially available, 22 years old, 68 overall, 91 speed. It's pretty solid athleticism there with that good acceleration. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier with players not necessarily having good agility or change of direction, but then you have a guy like Samuel Womack, who's even further down the list here, who's 23 years old, 67 overall, 92 speed, 88 agility, 93 acceleration, 88 change of direction. You kind of get the point here. There's too many corners to put on the field, and so somebody here is going to potentially be available for you within franchise mode, whether that be through trade or practice squad or free agency, something like that. And then we move on to the Giants, where we're going to take a look at Cordell Flott. And I wanted to add this guy to the list, even though he's another rookie, because I like what he has to offer from an athleticism and a size perspective. Now we're starting to get into some corners that are a little bit taller. It was actually kind of hard to find corners that I would consider a hidden gem or a sleeper type of a player that have height over 6 foot. So we at least get a candidate here that's 6'1", so he gives us a little bit of extension on that body frame. He's 21 years old and a 67 overall, so that's also what I really like about him. So this is the first 21-year-old player that we've picked, and again, he's a rookie, but I think you might be able to find a way to get this guy. 89 speed, so that is certainly serviceable, and you can build on that. 86 agility, not necessarily the best, but he's got really good acceleration, which is really important. So 92 acceleration, and then 92 change of direction. So it's almost like they forgot to fix his agility. It's odd that a player would have lower agility than they have change of direction, which is interesting, but certainly a player that I think is buildable and might be overlooked by a lot of people. And our next entry then is from the Jaguars, and this is a personal recommendation. This is, again, probably a player that you're not going to be able to get necessarily too easily, but a player that I had a massive amount of success with last year, and that is Tyson Campbell. Tyson Campbell turned into a monster of a cornerback for me. I was able to develop him into a superstar. I was able to get him up close to a 90 overall by the time our franchise was done. 22 years old now, 75 overall, 92 speed, 6'1" frame. So pretty much everything there that you're looking for. A little bit lower on the agility side of things, 86 and 87 change of direction, but I never had a problem with him not being able to break on the ball or change directions or anything like that. So he is a very, very good candidate. And as we approach the end of our list here, we have a few more entries. One of those final entries is going to be the Jets cornerback room. Again, they have a lot of players here that are interesting. I think the most interesting player here that might be available to you is actually Bryce Hall because of his somewhat lack of athleticism. But they have a lot of other young, very athletic corners, guys like Michael Carter II, Brandon Eccles, so on and so forth. And those players have really good athleticism, if that's what you're looking for. But what I actually really like is Bryce Hall. And the reason that I like Bryce Hall is because he's got a 78 overall at 24 years old. So while he does lack a little bit of athleticism in terms of his speed and his agility and things like that, I think you could turn him into a really good player if you just scheme him properly. He's 6'1", 202, and he's a 78 overall. I think he's going to be undervalued. This is one of those players that you can probably trade for cheaper than their overall, you know, what you would typically pay for a 78 overall young corner. So certainly somebody I think you should be on the lookout for, because I don't see a whole lot of users in franchise mode that would want to take an 88 speed corner and develop them up, but I personally would take this guy and develop him up because you could use him in so many different ways as long as you just know how to use him effectively. And then our next to last pick on this list is actually going to be from the Packers, and this is Eric Stokes. I just simply couldn't not put him on this list. This is probably going to be one of the most difficult players, if not the most difficult player to acquire from this list, but I have to have his name on this list so that you guys know that he's out here. here. He's that kind of prototypical super athlete that you're looking for that has a decent overall, and he's a 78 overall, so 23 years old, 95 speed at 6'1". I don't really need to say a whole lot more. His other stats are pretty solid as well. And finally, we come to the Seattle Seahawks in our final entry here, and a team that has a ton of cornerbacks that are not necessarily high overalls, but could be considered potentially hidden gem or sleeper type of players. No, we're not talking about Tariq Woolen. I actually have an individual picked out on this team, and that individual is Isaiah Dunn. We have to scroll so far down on this list that on the first page his name doesn't actually pop up, and this is why I think he'll be available to you, because in CPU franchises, if there's a CPU team controlling the Seahawks, they very well could put this guy out there on the practice squad or in free agency. He is 23 years old, 66 overall, 6 foot, 93 speed, 88 agility, 92 acceleration, and 84 change of direction. I don't really need to say a whole lot more there. I know everybody's looking for athletes. He does have that 6-foot frame that's going to help him get a few more plays than he would if he was shorter. And again, he's so far down on the depth chart here, or so far down on the roster anyway, that I think that he could just end up out there for you, even if just by mistake. So certainly know his name and know the names of all of these players on this list. And while you're writing down those names or keeping track of those names or looking for those players in franchise mode, hit the like real quick, subscribe to the channel, comment down below. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.